Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof for the 9th of November 2024. And I am staying at a friend's house at the moment. If there is the sound of children coming from the room next door, that's because there are children in the room next door making sound. So apologies, sorry, not sorry. It's the way things are. I'm very happy to have this little study to be able to do this video from. So thank you. Okay. We have a very high number in the Ukrainian general staff figures for personnel loss. So all the usual caveats apply to these figures, of course, and you can find them in the description to the video below. So we have 1,660 personnel loss. That's huge. Another absolutely staggering number for Russian personnel losses. 5 tanks is below the daily average, but I think that's still going to be somewhat useful. 36 troop carrying AFVs, so infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, mine resistant ambush protection vehicles, 36 of those. That's almost double the daily average. 23 artillery systems, a little bit lower than previously, just over the daily average. I think we have, it'll be interesting to see, actually, should we do that? I wonder whether the average of artillery systems lost is, oops, no, that's exactly the wrong thing to look for. The average of artillery systems lost has probably dropped considerably over the last week. I think your 7-day rolling average will be very much low. In fact, we're not going to look at the data. We're going to look at artillery here. And the internet's not quite as good at the moment. Okay, so here we have the artillery losses. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller just so you can get a sense of the gradients on these graphs. So as the blue line is the total, so it's always going to go up because you're adding to it. You're never taking away from that. But you can see, first of all, that these high orange lines of daily losses have dropped right back down really seriously around that week, and then down again here. So that means that the gradient for the blue line is definitely shallower. So the steeper the blue line, the heavier the losses are. So as you can see, sort of goes up, becomes a little bit steeper here that reflects that patch, and it becomes steeper coming up here, reflecting this patch, and then it's a tiny bit shallower there. And that, in fact, if you can see, it's quite difficult to see. There's an orange dotted line here. That is your trend line, and that drops massively. So the trend, the 7, is that the 7-day? That's a poly trend. I'm not quite sure what that means. Some statistician can tell me, but certainly the trend has dipped right down there, suggesting that indeed the Ukrainians have destroyed far fewer bits of kit over the last month or so. In terms of artillery, what does that tell us? Does that tell us that the Russians are struggling to get hold of as much artillery? Are the Ukrainians struggling, therefore, to find targets? Or is it that the Ukrainians are running lower on drones or finding it difficult for some reason on their end to acquire artillery piece targets? So on and so forth. We can come up with a number of different plausible scenarios. I would have thought the most plausible, most probable is that the Russians are struggling for artillery pieces. If you look at the stockpiles, if you look at seeing M46s and even older artillery pieces than that, and we're talking 1946 pieces onwards, it's far more probable that the Russians are struggling to get hold of as many artillery systems as they would have had 2 years ago. That seems eminently probable given those kind of data points. 66 vehicles and fuel tanks. That is pretty decent, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So that's the loss list today, and we do have an Andrew Perpetual loss list, which is fantastic. Always great to have him and his team doing this amazing work. Now, combat asset losses are going from yellow down to orange and that kind of reddish color there. Compare that to the Ukrainian losses there. That's probably 2.5 times, or maybe, probably 2.5 to 3 times the Ukrainian combat asset loss. So that's good news. And then just in general, it's about 3 to 1, maybe a little bit more of a ratio of all the equipment lost Russian to Ukrainian. Right, for the Ukrainians, actually, if you were to take most of this comms equipment, Starlinks, out, the figures would look even better. The Russians, yeah, only have a few bits of surveillance and comms. Okay, we have a boat. We've got a Leopard 1A5 destroyed and a Leopard 2A6 damaged. So that is not great for the Ukrainians. However, like I've said before, it's kind of double-edged sword. So the better the equipment is you see on the list, the more the Ukrainians are going to be using the better equipment. So if you're going to lose better equipment, it's kind of a good sign because it means you're using better equipment. I'd much prefer the entire Ukrainian tank force to be Leopard 2s, right? And so therefore, if they were using entirely Leopard 2s, every destroyed or damaged tank you would see would be a Leopard 2. So, that's bad that they've lost a good Western piece of kit, but it's good because they're using a good piece of Western kit. So always have that kind of, there is a tension there between, damn, and yeah, they're using it. But that's how I feel every time I see this, which is bad, good. Same with Bradleys and infantry fighting vehicles when you see them on the list. So here we've got a damaged Bradley and a damaged BMP2. Okay, you prefer to lose BMP2s because they're less valuable, but actually, no, you prefer the Ukrainians to be in Bradleys because they're more survivable and they're better at blowing up other stuff. So actually, I prefer to see Bradleys on this list than BMP2s, as long as there is still that supply of Bradleys, and we'll put aside all the issues to do with the US continually supplying Ukraine with kit going forward. I'd much prefer to see a whole list full of Bradleys, and that's kind of what we see with the APCs, right? M113 Striker, Humvee, FV103 Spartan, that's a UK provided one, and then into the mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, you've got Max Pro, Kozak, 7, QP, and some unknown MRAP. In other words, 100% of that stuff is Western, which means they are using far more frequently using Western APCs and MRAPs. And that's actually because they don't have that many. The Russians don't seem to, and I'm going back to kind of Soviet times and onwards, don't seem to have as many MRAPs as Western forces. So for the Russian losses, you're much more likely to see APCs and IFVs opposed to MRAPs. So in fact, if we look at the Russian losses, that's exactly what we see: IFVs, APCs, and one MRAP. So when it comes to the Ukrainians losing MRAPs, they're far more likely to use Western provided stuff because the West has provided more stuff. They have more MRAPs than Soviet era and legacy equipment. Okay, trucks. We've got a few trucks on there, pickup trucks, civilians, and so on and so forth. But it's not a huge loss list in terms of combat assets. We go up to the Russians. The Russian losses. We've got an OSA, air defense system that has been damaged. We've got a couple of electronic warfare equipment pieces. It's difficult to know without looking into the original video whether that's like a small bit of equipment you might carry on yourself, or it could be a much bigger bit of kit set up on top of the building or whatever. So that's yeah, it depends. Okay, tanks, 5 tanks, all damaged apart from one, which is destroyed. T-72s, T-80s. Then we look at the infantry fighting vehicles. Quite a long list of them, probably about 15, and all but one destroyed. So that's really good news for the Ukrainians. Although for the Ukrainians, we didn't look at that. The destroyed 100% of their APCs and 50% of their MRAPs were destroyed. However, there's only 4 in each category there, so that's not too bad. Infantry fighting vehicles, only 2 there, and they were both damaged. But for the Russians, let's say 15, something like that, and 14 of them are destroyed. So that's really good. A good rate for the Ukrainians there, mainly BMPs, BMP 1s, 2s, and 3s, and BTLs, BMDs thrown in as well. Armored personnel vehicles, all of them destroyed. That's all 6 Tiger M's and MTLBs, and an MRAP there. So, and then trucks, ATVs, sort of four-wheeler quads, and Desert Cross 1000-3. Those are the golf buggies. A bunch of laders there, pickup trucks, loaves, motorcycles. A lot of those. Most of the civilian vehicles in that category are destroyed. So again, good rates there for the Ukrainians. There's a lot of vampire drones being used. These are the hexacopters, often used at night. They're bigger drones and make a lot more noise, and they're obviously easier to see because they're bigger. So they're better used at night, and they end up doing a lot of damage, thermal imaging on board, and yeah, dropping bombs, and then the usual FPV drone drop bombs. But again, it's look at how many things are taken out by drones. Not many by ATGMs, You get things that are often abandoned because they've run over a mine. So often it's mines that start doing the damage, and then they're abandoned, and then they get hit by drone. But drone, and a lot of unknown, because you just see a wreck on the road. You're not quite sure what took it out, but invariably it's either drones or mines plus drones. Seems to be the main way of destroying vehicles these days. Okay. So the AFU, the Ukrainians have repelled a joint assault by Russians and North Korean soldiers in Kursk, according to Forbes. Russian Marines from the 810th Brigade, with the support of North Korean soldiers, attacked Ukrainian positions on November the 7th. 10 BTRs were destroyed or abandoned. So the Russians are just losing a lot of kit that is being visually confirmed, both these videos and then picked up by Andrew's team. And there's 15 IFVs and 8 APCs and MRAPs and whatnot, and then you look here and you see huge amounts of vehicles being lost, so on and so forth. Then we have presumably the 810th here. So this could be that footage that we're just talking about. As Gick, who is on Andrew's team there, does a lot of geolocation. Massive, presumably 810th experiences what military experts call Russian, presumably the 810th. Experiences what military experts call a massive cluster. At least 4 BTRs abandoned or destroyed. I think we saw still images of some of them recently, and he geolocates that. So yeah, a lot of This is the one. This is the one I showed you actually the other day, where you've got 4 of them. No, there's 5 of them there, and then there's that one there, and then there's apparently a couple of others, or maybe 4 others in a field nearby. So yeah, a lot of destruction there. That's in Kursk, it appears, but I have talked about that one before. That's just geolocation of that. And here we now have the strikes last night. So usual Russian activity, which constitutes an awful lot of drones being sent into Ukraine. They fired 51 drones, 32 of which were shot down, and 18 were stopped by electronic warfare. That just leaves 1 drone to get through. He's saying that must have been the one in Odessa, because Odessa saw some activity, unwanted activity. So, okay, Tim White says a lot of activity overnight in Russia, which, I want to come on to that later. So we're going on to Ukrainian, what's happened in Ukraine. So Russian drone yesterday, so this is in the daytime, hit the residence of the Estonian ambassador in Kyiv. Now, I don't know if that would be on purpose. Drones above Kyiv are much more likely to be interfered with and shot down, as Kyiv's the capital city and they had the best air defenses. So it could just be it flukily hit an ambassadorial residence, and it's unlikely that was a target, but who knows? And then Odessa, this happened last night. Odessa's nights used to be sleepless because the city's vibrant nightlife. Now they're sleepless because Russia wants to take away our lives, says Oscar Domesticated here. Really horrific visuals there of massive fire. One presumes a drone has slammed into near that building, to vehicles there. Not good visuals. And then actually we'll move that till later. Just a few observations about, in fact, I think if we look back at Tim White has quite a good thread of the strikes that took place. Let's have a look here. Yeah, so to Odessa, tragedy affecting one family in particular. Mother died and her father and son are among 8 people injured in the hospital. Their home was destroyed. That looks like it could be where all that burning was that you saw. I'm not 100% sure, though. We have, again, evidence that it's civilian areas that get affected with these strikes more often than not. Total of 13 injuries were recorded, as well as a woman's death when the killer drone hit a highly populated area of Odessa. Elsewhere, falling debris caused other injuries and fires around the region. Odessa seems to be very much a place that is consistently targeted. Damage also to Kharkiv overnight, villages being shelled in that region. and getting in and out of Kharkiv has become a bit more problematic today after Russia's serial Grom bomb smashed into a major road. We'll talk about that in a second. A hypermarket, gas station, and a hotel were damaged, as was a trolley bus wiring and other infrastructure. So, yeah, more and more damage to Kharkiv. Dnipropetrovsk region, damage there as well from shelling, and so on and so forth. So the usual pretty horrific attacks by the Russians, but a couple of observations about the drones that they're using and the munitions on board. Here is a photo published claiming to show for the first time, we think, thermobaric munition used on an attack drone. So that appears to be on a Shahed drone. Previously, warnings have been issued by Ukraine, but without proof. However, though this looks genuine, it cannot be independently verified. So it's your typical Shahed drone, and underneath it, there's your thermobaric warhead, which is going to cause quite a lot of damage. Okay, Russia is also actively using the new 600 kilogram carb Grom E1 with a range of up to 120 kilometers, according to Telegraph. This is a huge challenge because planes can now drop this 120 kilometers away from their target. It used to be 50 kilometers was your guided glide bomb range. Now we've got 120 kilometers, and that means air defense is going to make it's going to be even more difficult to shoot these planes down, which means that there's even more of an impetus to destroy the planes as they are on the airfields. Right, that seems to be the most sensible thing to do, and that's the one thing that the Ukraine is not being allowed to do. And as a result, Russia is just happily bombing places like Kharkiv with impunity. The range is provided by the rocket engine here. In this case, the enemy has already used these area bombs to attack Murad, Kherson, and, of course, Kharkiv, as mentioned. So that is a real worry for the Ukrainians. On the other hand, the Ukrainians had their own success last night, it appears. A lot of activity overnight in Russia, which says it shot down all 50 Ukrainian drones. 2 were destroyed over Tula region. That's strange because locals report hearing 10 or 11 explosions, such as these, which look and sound a little more like air defense work, a little more than air defense work. In other words, sounds like things are falling to the ground and exploding in a very intended manner. I'm not going to play that, but there's videos of explosions in Tula. In the city of Alexin, a chemical plant which produces gunpowder, ammunition, and other projects used by Russia's military was targeted. Also in the same city in Tula region is the Alexin experimental mechanical plant, which was involved in the manufacture of defense products. So they have been targeted. What else? Let's have a look. We have Russian media reporting that 10 Ukrainian drones attacked the Alexinsky, a chemical plant in Tula. 1 drone was shot down, 8 fell on the plant's territory, and 1 on the Alexinskaya TPP. Sounds like a thermal power plant. Several buildings and 3 nearby houses were reportedly damaged. So I'm unsure as to whether there was any damage to the intended targets. The kind of 8 fell on the plant's territory might do a lot of heavy lifting there for the Russians in terms of being very vague. Yeah, as someone says here, 8 fell on the plant's territory. That's a Russian way to tell you that 8 hit the target. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe not. And then, yeah, some footage here coming from November the 3rd. So this is a good 6 days ago, where a drone struck a tent camp of Russian forces from the 33rd Guards Rifle Division near Novocherkassk, Rostov region. Russian media reports that conscript soldiers were at the training ground. And actually, there's quite a lot of damage done here. So you've got this sort of training tent area, and can't quite work out what was really done in terms of damage and casualties, but you can see that these tents have taken a bit of a hammering in that area. Still smoking there, but yeah, that's a drone in Rostov region. That's a sort of, in my opinion, that's a sort of site where you should have like 100 drones, like 50 drones. And I wonder the scale of the Ukrainian production of drones, because actually they haven't sent that many over the last month. They kind of, I don't know whether they took a break due to the American elections, uh, but if they did, you'd expect them to be picking that up again now. Now we are seeing more drones. So last night there were drones, night before there were drones, a couple of aeroplane drones hitting two frigates in the Caspian Sea the night before. So they have picked things up. But you would expect, if the claims are true that Ukrainians are able to make these drones at the same rate as Shaheds, or at least that was an earlier claim. I think the Russians have really upped their production of Shaheds now. Either either way, the Ukrainians need to be producing drones, attack drones, at the rate of the Russians are Shaheds. The Ukrainians need to be sending 100 drones a night into Russia and into occupied territories. It's an absolute necessity. They need to be doing that with drones, and they need to be doing it with ballistic missiles. It's got to be the major objective for the Ukrainian defense forces at the moment: produce enough stuff to throw into Russia to get them militarily on their knees and economically on their knees. Okay, that would be the intention. I'm not saying that that's likely to happen, but that's what the Ukrainians need to be doing, and it doesn't seem they're able to at the moment. From at least the data I'm seeing, maybe we might see a week's worth of like crazy amounts of drones, but I don't know. You can but hope. Right. Anyway, that's enough from me. Certainly for this video. I might try and get out my geopolitics video in a second. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate your support, and take care. Speak soon.